Hello. For many years, I have suffered from a common issue. When I wake up in the middle of the night, I find it really difficult to get back to sleep. And over time, I've developed different strategies for dealing with this and coping with this, like I think everyone does who experiences some level of insomnia. So sometimes I'll watch a nature program, sometimes I'll listen to a podcast or an audiobook, but sometimes it feels like only reading a physical book will help lull me back into unconsciousness. So I have a number of books here that I find especially effective in helping me get back to sleep because, of course, it needs to be the right kind of reading material. It can't be too disturbing or thrilling, but it also needs to be engaging enough that I don't start to feel bored or annoyed by it because that will just wake me up even more. So I want to go through all of these choices, but I would love to hear if you have any books that you find particularly helpful in getting you back to sleep. And also just to say, this video is very kindly sponsored by Serious Readers, who create excellent indoor reading lights, which are especially helpful when reading in the middle of the night. Now, many of these have become kind of comfort books that I've returned to again and again over time, but a new favorite that I found and read just recently is Orbital by Samantha Harvey, which follows six astronauts as they are in a space station which is circling our Earth, and they observe the planet and make observations about it while also reflecting upon their own lives and their relationships with each other. And there's just a beautiful meditative quality to this novel, which looks at issues to do with mortality and the environment, but is also just so thoughtful and beautiful in its language and in how it observes the beauty and the wonder of our planet. And so I think it's a novel that I'm going to keep going back to again and again. A novel from the past several years is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, and the environment and mood of this story is very reflective of like a dreamlike space, because we follow an individual who inhabits a series of labyrinthine halls which are filled with big, beautiful marble statues, which he moves amongst and observes. And there are lower levels to these halls which are filled with seawater and which have tides, and then there are upper levels which are filled with clouds and sky. And it is so beautiful, but there is also a central mystery to this story, and wondering why he inhabits this space and what he's doing here. And so there's an intrigue which pulls you throughout the story, but also just the language that Susanna Clarke uses to evoke this very special place is just so gorgeous that I find this novel supremely comforting. One of my favorite novels of all time is Ladder of Years by Anne Tyler, and this novel follows a woman who has a seemingly happy marriage and family life, but she just walks out on her life one day and moves into an apartment where her only goal is just to read as much as possible. And we follow her on this journey, and I think it's especially good to read in the middle of the night because it almost feels like, when you're awake in the middle of the night, it feels like you are in this like strange space in the world when almost everybody else is asleep. And so you're inhabiting this space which is purely your own, and which you can just think and reflect on many different things, although it can be really torturous if you're really tired and need to get more rest. And so I think it's really wonderful following her journey on this, and how it like reflects this kind of this dream we have sometimes of just leaving our lives, no matter how like happy or difficult we find our lives. Sometimes we just want to leave it and to find our own space, to just read and think as much as possible. And I find this story just absolutely beautiful. I have this special edition of the novel, which comes with an introduction by Anne Tyler, where she discusses how she initially got the inspiration for writing this story when she was on the beach one day and she was wearing a t-shirt for the novel 100 Years of Solitude, and a woman stopped her and said, "Oh, I really wish I had that." And Tyler responded, "Oh, do you mean the novel?" And she said, "No, I wish I had 100 Years of Solitude." And so she wrote about this character that tries to find this within her own life. And it's really fascinating following how this character's journey, trying to find and achieving the space of her own. As I mentioned in the beginning, this video is very kindly sponsored by Serious Readers. Now, getting back to sleep after waking up in the middle of the night not only requires the right kind of reading material, but also the right kind of reading light. And I have tried many over the years, but the most effective I've found is this, my high definition light from Serious Readers, which I've been using for over a year and a half now. I've never had any issues with it. And what makes it so special is that Serious Readers uses what they call daylight wavelength technology, which replicates the daylight spectrum as close as technically possible. This makes the light feel warm and natural to read under. It's not too harsh like some other reading lights, and it can be adjusted to be brighter or more dim as much as you want it to be. And also the neck can be angled to focus directly on the book rather than lighting up the room around me, and just helps lull me back to sleep. So if you are interested in getting a new reading light for the middle of the night, I would highly recommend Serious Readers. I will put a link in the description below so you can check them out. And if you decide to buy one, I have a special offer for you. Be sure to enter the offer code Eric24 when you're checking out, because this will save you £100 on a high definition light and give you free shipping within the UK. So I wish you happy reading and a peaceful night's sleep. A great old classic to return to is Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland books, because the dreamlike and surreal quality of these stories is so bewitching and engaging, but also I find it really comforting and will just kind of like help lead me back into this dreamlike state. And but also the wordplay in these novels is so like pleasurable and just kind of tickles me. And so yeah, I know some people find these stories like a bit too disturbing, but I find a bit of like weirdness helps me get back to sleep. Another great classic that's more firmly in the category of adult literature is The Warden by Anthony Trollope. And this story follows a man who is the warden of a charity, but that is contested by another young man who has romantic designs on this warden's daughter, and so we follow this kind of political conflict. But the way that Anthony Trollope evokes his characters in such a wonderfully even-handed way. There are rarely any like true villains or heroes in his novels, although some could definitely be defined as that. But they all have aspects to their personalities which are positive and negative, and I find that so comforting and wonderful in reading his books. And but also the way he makes these social observations and observations about the time period is so fascinating. But there's also like great humor to his writing, where he'll gently poke fun at his characters. So I think this is absolutely wonderful to read in the middle of the night. But also the wonderful thing about this author is if you read him and enjoy him, he wrote so many more books, not least of all the entire Barsetshire Chronicles. So these are all of the books together, which follow on from The Warden, and which take place in the same fictional English county and involve a lot of the same characters. So there's a lot of pleasure in following these same characters throughout the different books, and they will pop up at odd times, even though a lot of new characters are introduced. And I think my favorite from the series is Dr. Thorne. I think it's the best realized of the novels, although my favorite scene from all of the books is towards the end of The Warden, when the Warden travels to London, and we follow his experiences throughout the city. But these novels are such a joy and a pleasure and a great comfort to read. Stepping aside from fiction, there is some great nonfiction, I think, that's also wonderful to read in the middle of the night. So there's Edith Hamilton's accounts of great Greek mythology, and following these tales, which have been told and retold for centuries, is such a pleasure, because they have a great sense of adventure to them, so are wonderfully engaging in this way, but also I don't think they're so distressing that they will keep you up even more, and but also there's so many funny things about following their stories and the personalities of all of these different gods and goddesses, many of whom are very vain and have their own designs on how they want the world to go, but they're continuously frustrated when those plans are messed up, and so they get involved and embroiled in all of these conflicts, and so following their stories, but also the incredibly imaginative journeys that they go on is so wonderful for the middle of the night. I find that nature writing is also especially good for midnight reading, and one of my favorites is Teaching a Stone to Talk by Annie Dillard, because we follow her in a number of essays as she's journeying through the natural landscape and making beautiful observations about it, but it is also about her philosophy on life and our connection with other people and with the planet. And I just find her thought process so wonderful to follow, because it really helps me reflect on some big issues that I'll wrestle with sometimes in the middle of the night, and will kind of calm me down rather than getting so stressed out about them. A wonderful memoir that evokes a bygone era is Inside a Pearl by Edmund White, in which the author, as an American, moves to France, even though he knows very little French and doesn't know many people there, but he lives there throughout the 1980s and early 90s, and meets many different people, and experiences the culture and the history of this wonderful country, and his accounts of the people he meets and the experiences he has this wonderful gossipy quality to it, which makes it so intriguing to read, but is also so insightful about the nation and the culture as a whole. And I sometimes fantasize about moving to another place entirely, and especially in a different period of time, which of course could never happen. So to experience Paris in this way, and to live through his experiences is just such a pleasure. My favorite author of all time is Joyce Carol Oates, and I also like returning to again and again her journals. So these are extracts from her journals from 1973 to 1982. So over a decade, when she was really growing into the height of her career and being very productive. I mean, she's always been incredibly productive, and her writing and novels have always been very strong. But following her daily observations about life and the people she meets, and how how her literary career is developing and writing projects that she is working on. It's experiencing this creative mind that is ceaselessly productive and fruitful, and that's something that I always aspire to. So I find it really interesting following how day by day she'll be struggling with a number of different issues to do with writing, but also ways to live in the world. So there's this wonderful quality about these journals where she's really like searching for a way to exist in everyday society. But there are also some wonderful like observations about, well, like frequently she'll just make observations about the color of the sky and meditations on nature in this way, because Oates is a big fan of hiking and being out in nature, and so yeah, I find these journals wonderfully comforting and meditative in this way. And finally, there is an anthology which was designed for this very purpose, to be read in the middle of the night, called Night Walks, which has been compiled and edited by Joyce Carol Oates. And these are essays and pieces of short fiction and poetry, which are by authors reflecting on the condition of being awake in the middle of the night when almost everybody else is asleep. So it starts with an essay by Charles Dickens called Night Walks, because famously he was an insomniac who would wander through the streets of London in the middle of the night. But also there are pieces by so many other writers like John Updike and Emily Dickinson and Ralph Waldo Emerson, and also by Lewis Carroll himself, and he has an essay called Pillow Problems, and talking about sleeplessness, and so yeah, I find these so fascinating to read through, but also it like keys me into so many different authors that I might want to explore more of their work in the future. So those are my suggestions of a number of books that might help you get back to sleep if this is something that you struggle with as well. But I would love to hear if there are books that you find especially effective to read in the middle of the night, or ways of coping with not being able to get back to sleep. Please let me know about that in the comments below. But I hope you're doing well and have a wonderful, peaceful night's sleep, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.